With all the news about federal layoffs, lawsuits, trade wars, Doge, we know there's a lot going on. But we want to catch you up on some economic stories out of DC you might have missed this week. I'm Kimberly Adams, senior Washington correspondent at Marketplace, with 5 stories that may have slipped by you. First, President Trump has already issued an executive order requiring some groups getting federal funding to enact stricter gender protocols. And this week, Republicans in Congress tried to pass a bill that would ban transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. But it didn't have the 60 votes needed to pass the Senate. The issue is probably not done in Congress. Republicans are looking at amending the Title IX law to make the administration's policy the law. Turning now to the weather report, as part of the Trump administration's government downsizing, layoffs continued this week at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA, where hundreds have lost their jobs in recent weeks. According to reporting from Axios, some of the laid-off researchers are responsible for reporting information about tornadoes, hurricanes, and severe weather in remote parts of the country. This week, the administration also terminated 4 NOAA advisory committees dealing with things like marine fisheries and coastal management. Some of those layoffs may not be as permanent as we thought. After a court ruled some of the mass firings of probationary federal workers was illegal, the White House's Office of Personnel Management updated the memo that originally gave the order to fire them. OPM's updated memo now says, quote, agencies have ultimate decision-making authority over and responsibility for such personnel actions. Still, the memo doesn't say anything about plans to reinstate the tens of thousands of probationary employees who have already been fired. And the public is losing a way to weigh in on healthcare policy. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is limiting the public comment process for some new federal regulations coming out of his department. For decades, members of the public have been able to give feedback on regulations as they're in development, but RFK Jr. said in a policy statement that dealing with all those comments made the process inefficient and limited the department's flexibility. CBS News reports this could make it easier for HHS to make changes to Medicaid funding and National Institutes of Health research grants without getting public input first. And finally, the government property fire sale that wasn't. On Tuesday, the General Services Administration, the real estate firm of the government, issued a for-sale list of about 440 federal properties across the country it deemed, quote, not core to government operations. Some of the buildings on the list included the headquarters of the Justice Department, the Labor Department, and the U.S. Census Bureau. But apparently, a lot of the agencies using those buildings didn't get a heads up, and many of the properties, especially those here in D.C., were dropped from the list the next day. Then the GSA just took down the list altogether. In a statement to the Washington Post, a GSA spokesperson said that they anticipate the list will be republished in the near future. That's what you might have missed out on in Washington this week. For more stories like this, head over to marketplace.org and listen to Make Me Smart wherever you get your podcasts.